Hi everyone, this is Jill from the North Woods. Boy, I'm feeling springy today, so I had to wear spring colors. This week I lost 1.4 pounds. Decent enough week. We're doing great. I also joined a work challenge where we're walking around the island of Ireland. So using exercise and walking distance to try to see if we can walk around the island. I need to get out there more because spring is on the way. Time to get back in shape for biking and time to get back in shape for hiking. I'm excited about it. Things are going great. Again, no side. I wonder if there's never going to be, like, either you get side effects or you don't get side effects, or you eat and then you get some side effects. I wonder if I'm just never going to get side effects. Now you say that and then I'm going to get some side effects. But I wanted to talk a little bit today, and I wanted to wait on this a bit because I wanted to do a little bit of research in what this is. Our understanding of science has changed so much about metabolic syndrome, or what they call insulin resistance. Like I said, I was first told this when I was 29 years old. And I started having different problems. I went to the doctor. She said, you have metabolic syndrome. It means all these different things. You got to lose weight. And so that's why I started trying, and I was trying to lose weight. And it was starting to get more and more increasingly difficult. Still, up to, a decade ago, I was still capable of losing weight. But something happened. I think in the end, it was getting more towards diabetes, and that killed it off. And I mentioned it last week that practically the same diet I'm on now, I lost 6 pounds in half a year. And as soon as I started taking Mounjaro, I lost 40 pounds in another 6 months. It's been revolutionary to me. But then you wonder, what happened? What's the difference? And you see a lot of people on YouTube who will say, oh, well, it just gets people to just shut their yaps and stop eating so much food. It's not just that at all. I am eating practically the same food. I am eating more protein and I am eating more fiber than I was before. But calorie-wise, the calorie difference of what I was eating before and what I'm eating now would have amounted to an extra 1.5 pounds in that 6 months. It is more than that, and people don't really understand it. So metabolic syndrome is something that's interesting. And then again, they started calling it insulin resistance. I started hearing some doctors talk about it, and they're saying, now that we understand more about it, they like the name insulin resistance even better, because metabolic syndrome just is sort of ethereal. And one guy described it as, you at one point have what you call metabolic flexibility. Hey, Jill's exercising. Let's pull some energy out of the fat stores, give them to her in her bloodstream so she can use them for her exercising. Oh, now Jill's eating a snack and going for a walk. She has a lot of sugar floating around in her body. We'll just wait until she burns that off. What happens to you is you stop pulling fat energy out at all. And eventually it just is in your bloodstream. It pulls out what it is. The muscles aren't getting it. So technically, this is bizarre. As I started doing more reading and research about it, your muscles inside are starving to death. It's why sometimes people get skinny, but like not a good skinny, when they have certain kinds of diabetes. Their muscles are starving. It's why people feel lethargic, why they don't have any energy. I will tell you that right before I decided to go back to the doctor, because I was fairly sure I was going deeper in towards diabetes, because again, I was going to work on it myself and try to fix this, I started noticing I was exhausted in the middle of the afternoon, but not a normal kind of exhausted. Take on a Saturday afternoon. People take naps on weekends, but what was happening to me is I'd go take a nap and I would sleep for 2-3 hours. And it wasn't even because I was sleeping that poorly. Suddenly, my energy level went from, I'm doing okay, to, and I realized something is really wrong. And as I started reading more and more about diabetes, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what's happening. You lose energy because the things that require energy in your body stop getting energy. I mean, you'd think you're overweight, you have all the sugar floating around in your body, you should be energized all the time, and that's not what is happening. One guy described it, the funny thing about insulin and glucose in your body, as they start going to war with each other, they start, everyone has their analogies towards it. One guy had the analogy, Dr. Fung had this analogy that talked about, you have a train that opens, and then you have these train employees who are supposed to open up the doors and let people into the train cars. and there's a whole crowd of people waiting there to get into the train cars. So the train is your muscles, and the guards or the door openers is insulin, and glucose is the crowd waiting to get into the train. But there are so many guards standing at the door, they block the door, and even though there's nothing inside the train, the crowd can't get into the train, the glucose, and that's true. So then I saw some, and I'll put some of these links in the show notes. One woman did a very good diagram that what happens is as you get more and more insulin in your body, you stopped becoming adept at the insulin. It fits into a receptor and it says, hey, glucose receptors, open the door, and it will stop doing it. And you get more and more of these insulin receptors, the more and more insulin is floating around in your body, and it takes more, and they won't open up the door. So inside your body, your muscles are like, oh, for the love of Pete, just feed me some sugar. And the sugar's floating around going, the doors won't open. I guess it doesn't want any sugar from me. And so it becomes resistant to insulin. And so they're starting to realize, as watching and reading a number of books and articles about this, the problem of metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes is too much insulin. And our body gets pelted with it, starts ignoring insulin. The more it starts ignoring it, the more it just starts pumping it out. I think that's where your pancreas, which creates insulin, starts getting burned out. But the glucose isn't going anywhere good. So either you pee it out, which is why people use that as like, oh no, I'm getting diabetic. I can see sugar in. Okay. Or it goes into fat stores. And so in order for us to store fat and to put on fat weight, we need the insulin to pack that in. But the problem is it's no longer getting used anymore. And I even saw one statistic, I don't know if I believe this or not, that they think that 88% of the world, 88% of the United States is impacted by metabolic syndrome in one way or another. That seems awfully high, but it has a lot to do with bad dietary habits, about sedentary lifestyles, about putting on weight. I think this is going to be this whole chicken and egg thing. I think what happens is that first, the body, you eat too much, and so there's sugar floating around. So the body starts churning out insulin, more and more insulin to deal with the glucose, so it either stores it or uses it. The muscles and the receptors no longer can use it anymore. That's insulin resistance. And then more and more insulin gets pumped out because the muscle is like, hey, dude, we're starving in here. Get us some sugar. So insulin starts pouring out even more, trying to feed the muscles, and it just turns into a giant mess. The point where I had surgery is that essentially this war between insulin and glucose floating around in your body, they think what happens is hormonal signals that are released from the brain never reach where they're supposed to get because there's so much stuff going on. And it becomes a problem. And so it can cause a lot of problems, and we'll talk a little bit about it. But what's interesting about the metabolic syndrome is that it's not really a single disease, and neither of this is. And we're going to talk about all the symptoms. It's a whole bunch of things that eventually lead to heart disease, stroke, and of course type 2 diabetes and all the side effects of that. And back, I think when I was a kid, people used to talk about it as, oh, that's just getting old. That's what happens to you when you get old, right? You just you have all these things happen to you. And now what we're seeing is that, in fact, it is a cluster of activities all related to this insulin that is too high in our blood system, to the fact where I was starting to listen to a number of doctors, and they were saying that this huge amount of insulin in our bodies is what leads to the blood sugar, which leads to the fat, which leads to the high triglycerides, the low HDL, which is the good cholesterol, high blood pressure, inflammation. I mentioned that I had skin allergies and all sorts of weird things that were going on with me. Abdominal fat, so that's going to be the fat that's sitting there at the waist, which is the bad fat, and the more dangerous fat. People getting fatty livers, fatty pancreases, and then it just leads to all the bad things. This is not a disease. It is a cluster of symptoms, all related to the fact that there's too much insulin in the body, and the body no longer deals with the sugar inside of your body. Someone was talking that at some point they hope and they feel like it's going to come soon. Instead of having glucose monitors on us, those continuous ones, I don't have one, but wouldn't it be better if we had insulin detector monitors? Because that is actually telling us what's going wrong. And in some cases, the reason I say that is there are people who have high levels of insulin, but don't have high levels of glucose. I don't know why. I don't know why that happens, but they get metabolic syndrome the same way. And sometimes, too, it happens because of toxicities in the body. There was a doctor talking about how he met this woman who had some sort of a heavy metal, toxic levels of it in her body. And she came to the doctor originally to say, hey, I'm trying to lose weight. I have done everything. And she wasn't that overweight, but I can't seem to lose weight. He found out she had high levels of toxic materials in her body. They did a detox of it, and then she was able to lose weight. Other people this happens to because of stress. So this metabolic syndrome, while high glucose is a good sign of it, isn't always. Instead, it would be better if we could look at how much insulin is floating around in your body. And so in the end, that's going to be how we fix this whole issue, is by reducing the amount of insulin we have floating around in our bodies to a normal level. And again, some other side, we talked about some other downstream diseases of it. Chronic inflammation, a lot of that is psoriasis and eczema. There's other inflammation symptoms that happen in the body. Those are the kind of skin things. What they call polycystic ovarian syndrome, which PCOS, which is essentially what I had. And that meant that you have a difficult time having children, which is what my doctor at 29 told me. But what happened eventually is that it makes everything so angry, it can actually lead to ovarian cancer. It can eventually lead to cancers in your body. And so this happens, like I said, when the body just stops listening to insulin. There's too much insulin, the hormone responsible. It has one job, is to deal with sugar, blood sugar. And when there's too much of it, the body just ignores it, stops doing what it's supposed to be doing, and then the body just has high blood sugar all the time, stores fat all the time, and instead it just goes haywire. And so what's supposed to happen in a normal person is that you have regular insulin. Like I said, you are metabolically flexible. When you exercise, it'll pull it from your fat cells. When you just got done eating, it'll take the available sugar in your blood and break it down and put it into the muscles. And so insulin is helping open and close the doors for glucose in our body. But as we get more and more resistant to it, as things go haywire, like I said, the pancreas produces more and more insulin. That's called hypoinsulinemia. And then the worst part, eventually you get to prediabetes and then diabetes. So it is a chain of events. So I think that I had a difficult time losing weight when I lost it the first time. I lost 35 pounds for 2 years, and that brought me down in weight substantial, but it was very hard to do. It was very easy to gain back. And I think it's because I was headed towards insulin resistance and I wasn't doing much to defeat it. Then when I tried it again, just during the pandemic, my body was like, nope. And I was barely, you cannot believe the things I was doing, the exercise I was taking. I was going for hour-long bike rides. I was eating low calories. I was eating good food. I have gotten rid of processed food other than Diet Coke, which I know is processed food, but eating really good things, food that you could identify on a farm kind of foods. That was my goal. And I wasn't losing weight at all. And so the symptoms then on the outside, again, have to do with excess body fat. Again, mostly a lot of fat in the stomach area. It has to do with inflammation. You get tired and exhausted. You can't do anything anymore. It even helps you crave sugar because now your body at this point is going through and saying, I need energy, help me. And so you keep eating more and more food because your body is craving it. And then you get something else, which we're not even going to talk about now, leptin resistance, which leptin is the hormone that tells you you're full. Eventually the body's like, whoa, dude, so much sugar in your bloodstream, full. And then the body starts ignoring that too. Processed foods, high sugar, also bad. And some of it, too, has a lot to do with genetics. And part of the problem, just talking about the gut fat, and why it's so much worse than, think about like a thigh and butt fat. It's very stable. Thigh and butt fat is very, very stable. It's hard for women to lose it, except for one time when there's a hormone that releases in the body, and that is when they're breastfeeding. So we carry around food stores in our legs and our butts. But the visceral fat is dangerous. It's interlaced in our organs, liver, intestines. It is, and visceral fat, they say, is metabolically active, which means that it releases cytokines, which also further impairs your insulin functionality. The gist of it, just to give a basic idea of it, is that up to like 100 years ago, we had problems feeding ourselves. And so people who were good fat storers survived. Famines, bad times, long distance travel, things that happened to people in ages before us. It helped us. It helped us survive. And so now we are a genetic world of good fat storers. And now, because we have plentiful food, we have food that's not very good for us, now it's killing us, is the gist of it. It just becomes a problem for us at all. And what can happen eventually if this keeps going? You get fatty liver, as I mentioned before, which is what they call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? So alcoholics have liver problems, happens in overweight people too, which then causes systematic inflammation in the body, and it makes the insulin resistance worse again. Then, if it keeps going on, you can burn out the beta cells in your pancreas. And so then your body no longer can produce insulin, and that almost moves you towards, I think that's what's wrong with type 1 diabetes. They don't produce insulin. So that's a different disease, even though they have the same names, and they have entirely different controls to them. And then once you get into that level, you're not making your own insulin. So I remember my doctor, when I got done with my first lab test, he said something to the extent of, "Oh, great, your blood sugar has come down. You're still producing insulin well." So I haven't damaged my pancreas at that point, so where I'm not producing insulin and my body systems are still functioning. Boy, what a relief that is. What they think of as type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetic is blood sugar rises, and then type 2 diabetes is the pancreas just can't keep up anymore. So now you're on your path towards burning out your pancreas. So the good news about all of this is when I was researching it and hearing it, is that we used to think that type 2 diabetes was permanent. Like now you have reached this stage and now you're going to have type 2 diabetes. And the fact of it is it seems like it's not true. Mounjaro quickly reduced my blood sugar. I have a home kit that I got off Amazon that I can test my blood. And I've been keeping track of it. I've been keeping track of it for a very long time. When I was back before I hit the diabetes stage, my sugar was high, but it wasn't so high. Kept monitoring it. And then I went to the doctor. It was very high right before the pandemic. And then the pandemic happened, and I'm like, I'm not going back to the hospital because there's a lot of sick people there and they need help. So I didn't go back. And my blood sugar, I started dieting. I started exercising more. And I brought it down 25 points, but I still was in the diabetic range. I had something called Dawn syndrome. And what happens is that, so you got a lot of sugar floating in your body, right? You don't eat overnight. So you haven't had anything to eat, and your body goes, I'm super hungry. It's morning time. And then it takes all the sugar that is still floating around in your body and starts pulling more sugar out of your fat stores, and now you're spiking. And what was happening to me with Dawn syndrome is I would wake up in the morning and my glucose would be somewhere like in the 180s. Let's say I exercise. I went into the gym and I started exercising a little bit because I'm not really much of a morning eater. My glucose would spike to 300. So I left a message with my doctor at that time. And, that's Dawn syndrome. You need to eat something right before bed. And that's a little mix of carbs and protein. And then eat the instant you wake up. The instant you wake up, you have to eat something. And so for 5 years, I had been doing that. And sure enough, if I did that and then I ate healthy the rest of the day, it would sort of sit at 150 all day long, which is still too high, but it wouldn't hit 300 like it was doing. So now, you can see this whole regulation is well out of control. But right now, Mounjaro reduced my blood sugar, reduced my A1C. Those are the two easiest things to fix when you're fixing metabolic syndrome. Thank goodness that that is better now. But now what has to happen is my insulin, I don't know what my insulin numbers are, but I assume they're going to come down if I stay here for years and not gain weight. Finally, the insulin numbers will come down. The receptors will go back to normal, and I'll be a regular person again and without having this metabolic syndrome going on. What happens is, when I was looking at this, is that it takes a while for that part to happen, and people yo-yo diet. So they lose a bunch of weight and then they gain it back. And the sugar thing is just, I'm done. I'm done with you. You've done this too many times and I'm done. Remember, I am not a doctor, right? So this is, mostly just research and things that you can do. And I'll put some links to some people in this YouTube channel. Talk to your doctor. Talk to a nutritionist who can help you work your way out. Because again, I'm not a doctor, but again, like you can, I just sort of see my history. I lost weight and I put it back on, and I lost weight and I put it back. I could just see my metabolism just getting shot every single time through every phase of this. So now we're good. Blood pressure was also one of the constellations of this, down. Belly fat coming down. Glucose down. A1C down. Bad cholesterol down. Good cholesterol up. Sleep apnea, because then as soon as all this starts going wrong, your sleep just goes to, and then you can't sleep anymore, and then this whole thing gets worse. Good. So everything is sort of righting itself, and that's why, again, I am so focused on maintaining this, because I think that if we can lose weight with these drugs, we will eventually get ourselves out of this pickle we've gotten ourselves into. And that's the real goal in the end. I listened to one guy and someone said, oh, and so what's the cure then for this metabolic syndrome? And is it Mounjaro and Ozempic? And the guy goes, oh, heck no. No. And I'm like, well, within a month, it got me out of being diabetic and it cured all the other things. So I think the answer is yes, this is a way for us to get out of it. Like I said, I think the big problem is we have to figure out, once we hit the finish line, how do we keep going in our healthy living? But, of course, dieting is big. Reducing carbohydrate intake. That's always been, I'm a noodle person. Boy, I love noodles. And that was always a big part of my problem. High protein, whole foods, fiber rich, vegetables, nuts, healthy fats. Fats are the least metabolically or insulin producing. So that's going to be olive oil, those cold fatty fishes, which I won't eat, sardines and salmon, those kinds of things. That helps improve it. High protein diet, which is mostly lean. That's going to be fish, poultry, that kind of thing. Not doing sugary drinks. Here's my big problem. I've never been a big sugary drink person, but I've always been Diet Coke and the drink packets. And my mom, best friend's husband, was one of the guys who invented NutraSweet, which was one of the very first fake sugars to come out. And I had just been one of the earliest users of it. I love, and I still do, and I know this is something I need to get on, but some people feel like those fake sugars do something to insulin-resistant people, and so I think eventually I need to get off of those. And then some people do intermittent fasting. For me, intermittent fasting when I was diabetic caused my glucose numbers to spike. And so I had to stop doing it. And I was kind of curious, like, do I fast until I lose weight and hopefully then the glucose goes down? Or do I eat these meals that the doctor wants me to eat to keep my glucose from spiking, but it was causing me to gain weight? And I just was perplexed about that. Go see a doctor and get some help if you're in that position. Strength training, that's why I'm doing it. Because when you have muscles, it burns off sugar. When you have things working for you, you will start burning sugar and regaining insulin sensitivity with muscle activity. If you don't have muscles, you're going to be in a world of hurt with your metabolism. Less important than strength training is then the cardio exercise. It's good for your heart. It burns off some calories. And making sure that you get good sleep. Bad sleep, again, increases insulin. Cortisol is another hormone, which is a stress hormone. makes sugar worse. I mean, you could see where you're going down into this whole collapse as everything starts to fall apart. These GLP medicines really have saved me. They were talking about the different medicines and rethinking diabetes and how you have too much insulin in your body. So we give people insulin. And that used to be the treatment. That was what we tried to do. You could see the problem with it is you have too much insulin, so we're going to give you more insulin. And what happens is it leads to more and more insulin resistance, putting on more and more weight. And so it helps people save lives. I am not telling anyone not to take their insulin. You should take it if a doctor prescribed it to you. That is something that's done. But in my mind, I wanted to fix this. And that's what was important to me. So my doctor was talking about band surgery, talking about metformin, which helps improve insulin resistance problems. It lowers blood sugar. But you know what? Honestly, these GLP-1 is a lifesaver. And this has been a lifesaver for me. And like I said, people laugh at it and say, oh, that's not a solution. It is a solution. The GLP-1s, as long as we can figure out how to keep the weight off for the rest of our lives, that's going to be important. So I hope that this helps. Again, it's something that you can do. Obviously, you have to start with small steps, regardless of what plan you decide to do. Even when you take Mounjaro, you start with small steps. But improving your health, improving your diet, improving the amount of weightlifting or resistance training you're doing, all starts with small steps. When you take small steps to improve your health and start improving on them, don't push yourself because you want consistency over big bang change. Maybe I think we can start working back this metabolic syndrome or this insulin resistance and start getting into a healthy place again. Once we get past this whole syndrome of things, or at least start improving it, then our weight comes off. And then we're starting to be in the good loop instead of the bad loop. I hope this helps. I wanted to really understand how did all of this go wrong, and now I can see, oh gosh, it was a long time, and then all of a sudden. Isn't that the thing where someone's falling off a building, and someone shouts out to a man who's falling off of a building, how's it going? It was good for a long time, and all of a sudden it was bad. That's, I think, how this all happens. I was good, and then I was falling off the mountain, and suddenly I was getting surgery, and things just started falling apart for me more and more. Whatever it is you have to do, whether you're doing it on Mounjaro or you're doing it through a better lifestyle and exercise and weight training, small steps, you can get there. Work with a doctor, talk to a nutritionist, have them help you do this. But I think we're learning more and more. We are certainly learning a lot more than I knew when we were kids about how to lose weight and what metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes is. We are getting it now. We're finally understanding the mechanisms of this, and we're going to see a lot more news just coming. I think the news is just going to start coming more rapidly. Thanks so much. Please remember, I have a podcast, Start with Small Steps. That's what this channel is a part of. It is about changing your life and improving your life in small steps. And I also have Small Steps with God, which right now is a Bible study. We're doing a chapter 3 times a week, a slow roll through the Bible. So take a look. My links are in this channel. Leave a message. Let me know how you're doing or what's going on with you. Thanks so much. Have a great day.